Hello, friends and family of Grace Lutheran Church. Happy Wednesday. Today I want to talk to you about our opening hymn for the fifth Sunday of Easter. That hymn is number 646 in the Lutheran Service Book. It is called Church of God, Elect and Glorious. And this is one of the newer hymns in our hymnal. It was written around 1980 by a British pastor named James Edward Seddon. And Seddon had spent 10 years of his life in the ministry working as a missionary to Morocco. And you can see that influence of his time as a missionary in the writing of this hymn, which really does talk about the missional responsibility, that missional vocation of the Church of God, elect and glorious, the royal priesthood, if you will. And so this imagery of the Church of God, elect and glorious, the royal priesthood, this comes out of 1 Peter chapter 2, especially verses 9 and 10. And 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 1 through 10 is our epistle reading for this week. So in this passage, Peter is talking about who we are, but also talking about the direction that we should take. He talks about who we are and the direction that the church is supposed to go in. So I want to read for you verses 9 and 10. Those are the two verses that are listed here in our hymnal as scriptural references for this hymn. So this is 1 Peter chapter 2, 9 and 10. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. So especially in verse 9 there, we see Peter talking about who we are. And he doesn't leave it there. He doesn't just say you're a chosen race, a people for his own possession, and move on. He says you're a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who saved you and called you from darkness to light, giving us a little bit of direction there. Later on in that same section of 1 Peter chapter 2, when we go to verse 12, he talks about living lives that are honorable, that our good works might be seen and people might glorify our Father in heaven. So Peter, in this writing, giving us who we are and what we are to do. And that is the same direction that this hymn by Seddon takes. The first three verses, there's 4 verses total, the first 3 verses of this hymn are made up of 2 different halves. It's like a bifold verse each time. And in the first half of those first 3 verses, Seddon talks about who we are, what God has done for us. Then in the second half of each of those verses, he moves forward and he tells us what we are to do. So to talk about some of the things in the first half of those verses, who are we? We are the Church of God, elect and glorious. We're a holy nation, a chosen race, called as God's own special people, royal priests and heirs of grace. That sounds exactly like 1 Peter, doesn't it? We are called out of darkness into the light. We've been brought to the truth, and our blindness has been turned into sight. We are no longer aliens, but we are home in God's mercy. We are citizens of heaven. And Pastor's going to talk a lot about the citizens of heaven thing in his sermon. So that's who we are, and that's great. Then we move into the second half of each of those verses. After Seddon and really the scriptures, right, tell us who we are, then it moves into what we're supposed to do. Seddon says in the first verse, know the purpose of your calling. Show to all his mighty deeds. Tell of love that knows no limits, grace that meets all human needs. Continues through the next verses, talking about letting our light shine to those around us, that God's name might be glorified, and how we are to let God's love flow out of us and into others, that they might know his mercy and his care. So doesn't just leave us with who we are, but moves us into what we are supposed to do. And notice the order for each of those verses. Seddon starts first with the good news about what God has done for us. And only then does he move into what we are to do. And that is the way that this whole situation works, right? It is the good news of what God has done for us that inspires us to do those things that he has given us to do, that mission of the church to share his excellencies and his glory with the people around us. So the final verse then kind of wraps it all up, and it encourages us in that work. It reminds us again of our identity and encourages us to go out and do the job of the priesthood of all believers. So I'm going to read the 4th verse for you guys. It says, Church of God, elect and holy, be the people he intends, strong in faith and swift to answer each command your master sends. Royal priests, fulfill your calling through your sacrifice and prayer. Give your lives in joyful service. Sing his praise, his love declare. So I don't know any other words to say to close this out than to echo what Seddon has already told you guys with the closing that we use every Sunday in church. Go in peace and serve the Lord. Thanks be to God. We look forward to seeing you guys back in church soon. Make sure you're checking your midweek emails for those opportunities that you still have here to serve your neighbor. And be looking for them in your own community as well. We hope to see you guys soon. Thanks.